Eric Darling here with Darling Data, and we are on a real roll lately. Am I blurry? I might be a little blurry. I don't know. I can't tell if I maybe put on too much moisturizer or if my camera is just. There we go. That's a little bit more. It's a little bit crisper for us, isn't it? We're on a real roll with these here office hours, so we're gonna do an office hours here, because that's what we're here to do. All right, so let's do this thing where I answer 5 of your questions, because I have 5 of your questions to answer. Well, sounds like a nice round number to me. If you like this channel and just so much, if you are so emotionally invested in this channel that you would like to become financially invested in this channel, you can sign up for a membership to support all the wonderful, charming, enduring work that I do here. There's a link right down in the video description for that. Since this is an office hours episode, this seems like the appropriate time to tell you that if you would like to ask a question here to get the answered live, this is the link to do it, which is similarly in the video description. Other ways to support my efforts and endeavors here in this ever-dwindling SQL Server universe are liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you would like to hire me to help you with your SQL Server, well, holy cow, you can do that. I do all sorts of stuff with SQL Server: health checks, performance analysis, hands-on tuning of the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst stuff you have on your SQL Server, dealing with performance emergencies, and of course, through osmosis, I lay hands upon your developers and I transfer the entire wealth of my SQL Server knowledge onto them, and you stop having performance emergencies magically. It's a wonderful thing. If you would like to, in a slightly less magical, osmotic way, learn SQL Server performance tuning from me, you can get all of my performance tuning training for 75% off, which means about $150 US, and that is good for the remainder of your life. If your relatives, if you have like a living, if you have a will of some sort, and you are smart enough to or maybe I'm gonna say smart enough, but if you are the type of person who would give your loved ones your email password after you pass on, you could pass this training on to whoever is left, whoever you bequeath it to. So if you're feeling bequeathy, you could just leave this to your descendants, your loved ones, because I'm sure that they would like to remember you as the type of person who was good at SQL Server performance tuning. Wouldn't want to just be ashamed of you, saying, "Oh, that guy couldn't read a query plan." What's wrong here? Anyway. Live and in person stuff that you can get out of the house and do. Wouldn't that be nice now that the weather is finally starting to shape up a bit out there? SQL Saturday, New York City. By the time this gets published, this event may have passed. It may have passed us all by. It may be beyond the grave. So sad if that happened for you. You missed it. You also missed a performance tuning pre-con on May the 9th by Andreas Walter. And you missed me handing out all sorts of sandwiches, cookies, breakfast items. It's a real downer. But upcoming still, Pass on Tour. New York City, the one in New York, Dallas, the one in Texas, Amsterdam, the one in Europe. I don't know if there's more than one in Europe. My geography is not that good. The usual Amsterdam. New York City, August 18th to 20th, Dallas 15th to 17th, and Amsterdam, October 1st to 3rd. And of course, the main event, the Tyson versus Holyfield Past Data Community Summit, taking place in Seattle, November 17th to 21st. Should have done my vocal warm-ups before I started here, but with that out of the way, let's answer these gosh darn questions, because that's what we do when we do these things. Come on, zoom it. There we are. Zoom it. Finally woke up. All right, there you go, buddy. Wipe that sleep out of your eyes. All right. How do I draw meaning from the feedback data column in sys.querystore plan feedback? It's a bunch of meaningless JSON about NUMA nodes. Well, the good news is it's not meaningless JSON about NUMA nodes. The node IDs that you see in there have nothing to do with NUMA. You might see some very high node numbers in there, and I assure you, you do not have 48, 50, 1,000 NUMA nodes. The node ID is actually the ID of the operator in the query plan that usually the memory grant feedback applied to. But your main question is, how do you draw any meaning from it? You really don't. If you run my store procedure sp underscore quickie store, you will, and you use the expert mode parameter, it will return data from that DMV, assuming that you are on a version of SQL Server where that DMV is available and accessible. But I mostly just use it to see if that plan is being affected by anything. I don't really dig too deep into it. SQL Server, there's another DMV in SQL Server that's like, it's another like automatic tuning plan feedback thing that has a bunch of JSON jammed into it. I think because Microsoft is like, oh, hey, we have JSON now, and developers are like, cool, let's shove JSON in random stuff, so we can show off our JSON queries. that I do also nothing with that. It's annoying, and some of the JSON like built-in functions you can only use in like SQL Server 2017 compat level 140 or newer. So I'm like, but what am I doing here? Why are you locking like open JSON behind this stuff? Did someone write their own open JSON function? It's befuddling. But short answer is I don't, and I don't think you would either. And Zoom is now being just an enormous pain in my rear-facing appendages. Let's move on to this question here. Facing a situation of compilation timeout on some functions that only goes away after recreating them, happening in different functions. Have you ever seen this? Any suggestions? Well, help me out a little bit here. Are they scalar valued functions? Are they being inlined automatically by SQL Server? Are they multi-statement table valued functions? Is the deferred table valued stuff going on with them? Are they inline table valued functions? Compilation timeouts, if you're seeing them, depending on what, how you're seeing them, usually something around, assuming that by compilation timeout, you mean they're taking so long to compile that your queries are timing out. Because I'm assuming that if you were just looking at the query plan and you saw compilation timeout in the query plan, that you would be smart enough to watch my video about compilation timeouts and understand that that does not mean that your query timed out. But if you're talking about queries timing out, then it may be that when your functions are running, they are doing some sort of stats update. Behind the scenes, you would verify that if you're on 2019 or over, looking for the wait on sync stats refresh wait type. That would be, assuming that you mean they are taking a long time to compile. But this question is really strange and vague. But typically, any piece of code where you're worried about the actual compilation of that code timing out is usually down to sort of like an auto stats update, while SQL Server is like, well, the stats are different, now I got to come up with a new query plan, so I'm going to wait for these stats to update and then come up with a query plan. Or your code is so mind-numbingly complex that SQL Server is taking its sweet old time trying to figure out how to come up with what the query plan should be. However, you did not provide nearly enough information for me to go into any depth or detail on these matters. All right, moving right along here. It's a little bit longer than that. Our websites use queries embedded in Cold Fusion web files. We are debating changing the most frequently executed ones to store procedures. Is there likely to be a performance gain in doing so? I'm thinking better plan reuse, less compilation and recompilation, plan cache bloat, etc. The queries themselves are fairly well written on the whole, and I've done a lot of index improvement. Is it likely to be worth the effort of writing store procedures and refactoring web files to use them instead? Well, I think one way that you could test that theory out, because to me, I'm not sure precisely when you say web files, if these are parameterized or if like variables are declared at the beginning or whatever else is going on with them. It would help to kind of understand like how the queries inside are formed. But one way that you could sort of test this theory out would be to use a database level setting called forced parameterization. So if your concerns around plan reuse, compilation, recompilation, and plan cache bloat are because these queries end up getting executed with literal values, and your big store procedure plan is to parameterize those values, then forced parameterization might be a way for you to validate your big idea to convert them to store procedures. Of course, forced parameterization could work so well that you don't need to go through all that store procedure rewriting. There might be some other upsides to using store procedures, just as far as like, being able to identify code by a specific object name, perhaps a bit more flexibility in the way that the code is written. But I think for your specific circumstance, I would just try the forced parameterization database setting to see how that goes. All right, moving right along here. How do you fix bad indexing on a VLDB? That's a very large database for anyone wondering about these acronyms at home. Building indexes on a 5 terabyte table. Whoo, boy, I feel your pain. I've been there. Even if it's something as trivial as just do a resumable rebuild to add page compression. Ain't a whole lot of hope for you there. 5 terabyte table, you're going to be waiting a while. Depending on like the hardware setup of that server, it's going to be a process. There are some things you could do to make it faster, but would require a maintenance window. For example, the online equals off. Often indexes build faster when they're built offline, but on a 5 terabyte table, I don't know that you have a maintenance window to do that. You've already mentioned resumable, so you've got that base covered. You would have to have one hell of a tempdb drive in order to use sort and tempdb, and it's sort of a depressing situation with MaxStop, because you can specify a very high DOP for your index build, but SQL Server may not actually use it. There are all sorts of index build strategies that SQL Server can employ, and there are several of them that sort of stitch the data together. And if your data distribution is not aligned in a way that would make using a higher DOP to build the index, then you would end up with a much lower DOP than you hoped. Remember that MaxStop is saying you can use this much. It's not a min DOP hint, right? It's not the minimum degree of parallelism, it's the maximum, right? So that's kind of a bummer there. There are also like the reason why the MaxStop thing would help is because it would help with at least 2 stages of the index build, that is reading the data from the base table and sorting the data. You would have lots of threads doing that work. What happens after that, when you actually start putting the data into the index, could be parallel, but it could also end up being single-threaded depending on the index build strategy that Microsoft, that SQL Server employs. I have a blog post that links to blog posts because a long time ago, some real nice, smart person wrote about all the build strategies that SQL Server has. So over on ericdarling.com, I have a post about different index build strategies for SQL Server that links to those. Paul White much more recently, because I made a video griping about trying to build an index at DOP 8 that SQL Server only used DOP 3 for, where he went into detail about that. So over on sql.kiwi, that's sql.kiwi, Paul has a post that really goes into detail about how SQL Server builds indexes like that in parallel. It might be worth taking a look at those. Might also be worth taking a look at the query plans for your indexes to validate which strategy SQL Server is using before you go changing a bunch of index build settings. All right, the final question, last but not leastest, right here. We have a configuration of alg, that's always on availability group for the folks at home, configured with 2 nodes. All right, no DR for you then, I guess. All goes fine for some time. Typical AG, everything's okay for a little while. I hate AGs. And then suddenly on the primary, all sessions became stuck on HADR sync commit. Oh dear. Someone did some big work. Someone had some big feelings there. Nothing completes anymore. Log sent queue counter goes up. Yes, that'll happen. We cannot figure out what could be that caused this. We've searched logs in DM views without finding, that's Dave Matthews views for anyone watching at home, without finding anything. Secondary and primary are identical in terms of hardware, Windows SQL Server versions and patches. Can you please give any advice on this? Well, here's the thing. If this is something that happens frequently, you will most likely want to get a third-party monitoring tool that will look at your server all the time, 24/7, so that you are not at the mercy of having to get on at the right time and start pressing F5 in all the right places to find all the right things. If this is something that just happened once in the past, well, we'll talk about that in a moment. But this is the type of thing that some outside observation would be quite beneficial for. You said that you looked at logs and Dave Matthews views, and I don't know what you didn't really specify which ones. I don't know if you were looking in the moment or if you were looking historically. But when you're troubleshooting AG problems, you can narrow things down. Well, in your case, because it's a 2-node thing, you can narrow things down to one of 3 places. Either something terrible happened on the primary. You did a lot of work there. I don't know, maybe you changed a big table, added a big index, rebuilt a big index, added a non-nullable, awful weird column to some table, and that blocked things up, because the secondary is like, whoa, lots of stuff coming here. It's also possible that something weird was going on the secondary. All sorts of strange things can happen on secondaries. The third thing, the thing that almost no one checks, is, well, you've got these 2 servers sitting here, but how do they talk to each other? There's a network in between them. It's entirely possible that something happened to your networking that messed stuff up. Perhaps a network cable became unplugged. It's difficult to say. But if this is something that happens often, then you need observability into it, get a third-party monitoring tool. SQL Sentry is still probably my favorite of the bunch. Once again, I do need to lament that SolarWinds owns it, because SolarWinds has not put nearly the love and tender care that was put into SQL Sentry when it was owned by SentryOne. It was an independent company. But it is still just about the best monitoring tool you're going to get for SQL Server out there for issues like this. Again, it's either something happened on node 1, something happened on node 2, or something happened with the communication between node 1 and node 2. It may not have dropped out entirely, but there could have been something else saturating the network path between them, that like something else not SQL Server related that saturated the network path between them, and the SQL servers had a hard time communicating. That wouldn't show up in the error log, because it's not like SQL Server is going to be like, oh, well, that network's gone, switching roles, primary, secondary, resolving, like reconnecting, crap, we got to catch up now. It wouldn't be like that in the error log. It would just, SQL Server is not going to be like, oh, network's kind of slow right now. I'm going to write that down for you. All right. This is something that proactive monitoring can clear up. Oftentimes, looking at a SQL Server after the fact, you don't really see a whole heck of a lot that would be useful if the error log and cluster logs don't show anything. So sorry about that. Anyway, that brings us to the very end of 5 questions. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I hope that you learned something. I hope that perhaps one thing that everyone could learn from these videos is how to ask good questions. A lot of the feedback that I end up giving is about the state of the question that was asked. So perhaps the art of asking questions is a lost one. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching and dealing with me for these 5 questions.